we're getting more and more medical calls, and quite a few of them end up being ALS calls. At the same time, call volume is going up. Availability of an ambulance is going down. I think the latest figures were something like 28% of the time or thereabouts we get an ambulance responding when we ask for one. So what it means is we have two choices. Either we work the call with our basic life support people and equipment and basically scoop and run to the hospital, or we try to get a medic unit from West Pierce. And in some cases, if we're responding with JBLM, if it's ladder 101, they usually have a medic on board, and sometimes that medic will jump aboard our BLS unit and go to the hospital with us. We have a really good relationship with them. Here's the big problem with ALS. The ambulance situation is only going to get worse. Falk is continuously reducing size, closing down cars, and they're switching to interfacility transport because that's where the money is. They just aren't apparently able to make enough money to keep the operation going with the calls that they get, because I believe that most of the reasoning is because when they bill, that doesn't mean that's what they get. Insurance companies are going to pay what insurance companies pay, and Medicare and Medicaid pay a small fraction of what it actually costs to do business. So they're in a tough situation. For the citizens, I don't believe that private EMS providers are the answer anyway. You're talking about people that have life and death responsibilities that are getting paid hamburger flipping wages. And that's not in the best interest of the general public. The best interest of the general public is to have professionals, professionally trained and professionally managed, doing that kind of business. So that's where we're at right now. Basically, we're running on a wing and a prayer, and but our plans for the future are that I do intend to run an ALS levy again, probably in 2 years. We'll ramp up for it in the next year. We're going to talk about this fire department training captain position in a minute. That position would also be in charge of EMS, and that person would set that whole machine in motion, and then manage it after it actually becomes reality. So what my hope is that in a couple of years we will have a full-blown ALS program in the fire department, which, because those personnel are dual-purpose personnel, they're also firefighters, that will also address our fire staffing deficiencies and give us a reasonable level of staffing, which will be much better for service and a lot safer for everybody concerned.
Do we know of any similar communities or cities that had to overcome ALS challenges like we have, and maybe if they were successful in getting a levy passed, what they did? And
yep. Yeah, pretty much every fire department in the county has been in the same position that we're in. For us, when I was with Lakewood and later West Pierce, we started back in the 80s. We saw the private ambulance companies as being not as reliable or professional as what we wanted. We also wanted dual-purpose personnel that could do, both jobs. And we ran our first levy for paramedics back in, I think it was around the mid-80s. Yeah. And pretty much everybody else has followed the same course. I mean, what we do is we assess the needs of the community, and we're constantly trying to project and predict, where we are now, where we're going to need to be in a few years, and we plan and move towards those goals. And that's what we're doing here.
Maybe if we can get some relief on the ST3 tax, we might be successful. Okay, anything else on that?
Not for me, but if you or anybody else has any questions. perfectly happy to try to answer.
I like the timeline of 2 years. I think that ties in with the next presidential election, and I feel like we get the best voter turnout at that time.
Oh, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, so I think that would be ideal. It's a perfect time for it, I think. Okay, I was just curious where things stood, and if you have any discussions or meetings about it, I would love the opportunity to be part of that. Just sit and listen, maybe even observe. And next on the training captain.
Okay. This training captain position came about for a couple of reasons. The first being that part of the mayor's budget initiative for 2019 was to provide the fire department with a full-time secretary receptionist, which that would be nice, but that would be a luxury for us. We need boots on the ground. So when I saw that, I basically put forth the idea that instead of a full-time secretary receptionist, that we get a half-time captain level position who would be in charge of training and EMS. And there's several reasons for it being part-time and being a captain's position and being in charge of training and EMS. Number one is when I ask for anything, whether it be equipment or personnel, it's to fill a requirement. And there is a big hole in our operation, and that one of those holes is training. We do not have what I would consider to be an acceptable training program. We aren't meeting state or national standards on our training. We're pretty much reactionary, trying to maintain maintenance, run calls, and train with what meager resources that we have when we have the time. What we need is a professional trainer with a depth of experience who can plan, budget for, and actually deliver all different kinds of training, whether it be out on a drill ground or giving formal classes. And so what we need is we need a training officer. It needs to be a captain's position because any training officer needs to have some level of rank, because in my experience, if you have a lesser ranking training official and they're telling shift personnel, shift commanders at another rank where they need to be and what they need to do, they don't like it. So that person needs to be at least at their rank. And so captain is the way to go for now. I would like to get this person in place in 2019, get a training program going. This person would also be a responder. Both the training and the lack of enough staff for response, staff being non-shift personnel, was identified by the Washington State Survey and Training Bureau as a deficiency for us. And because I want to be re-rated in about 3 years, once this train is back on the tracks and where I want it, we need that position filled. If we don't get it filled, we're not going to get a better fire insurance rating. And besides that, we aren't running as safe of an operation as we should be. So during the next year, we will concentrate on training and the other programs that we started this year that are not finished yet. That person would also prepare for the ALS levy and planning for an ALS program. And then, if and when we pass an ALS levy, that position then will become a full-time position. And the rank will be increased probably to a battalion chief level. As far as the money part of it goes, I believe a half-time captain with no benefits, because this person would be similar to myself, a retired individual with a lot of experience. There would be no benefits, and they would get half pay and work half time, which would be adequate for what we need for the next year, but inadequate for what we would need after that. And so that then basically it's a wash. between what we would have spent for a full-time receptionist secretary, but it's a much better use of the money. And then when that position becomes full-time, it will be paid for in total by the levy. So that's the money end of it.
So when you say half-time, are you talking 20 hours a week or 25?
Yeah, 20 hours a week.
20 hours.
I estimate that would cost us about $37,000 a year, which is a bargain.
Is that something that we need to present to council, or is that just going to be absorbed?
Well, it's all part of the budget. It's all part
So it's
of the
already
budget
in there.
initiative. So no. I mean, the council will be briefed on it.
Yeah.
The council will have to approve the budget.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay, all right, sounds good.
Yeah. No, we're not done talking about it.
I can be supportive of that. Okay, back to old business on the fire department equipment needs.
Okay, I think it was Mr. Gruba that asked me to go over the equipment. And I'm not talking about the fire apparatus. That project is already approved and in motion. I believe what he wanted to know about was the other equipment items that we are going to be seeking to purchase over the next year or so. So I've listed some of those out. First one is extra, and I'll tell you how we're paying for them. The first one is automobile extrication equipment. We're switching, our equipment is old, heavy and obsolete. We're switching to modern battery powered equipment. We're speccing those out and trying out different ones at this time. We will buy one set. We already have the money in the ER&R fund for that set. We actually have more than enough. And we'll be buying those shortly. We will buy another set next year, but I'm delaying the purchase of the second set so that we can retire our obsolete set as our backup. We'll buy those next year because I want to give it some time to make sure that we're happy with the ones we buy. Besides that, battery technology changes so fast that by next year there could be an even better choice. So, and those will be paid for also through the ER&R. So there's no budget problems. We will be seeking to purchase another staff vehicle, I believe, next month. That is so that I can give Larry back his car, which is the one I'm driving right now. And the one he's driving will go to the fire marshal, who's driving a 18 or 19-year-old pickup truck. We are not going to get rid of that pickup truck, though. It still has some life left into it, and we're going to use it as a utility vehicle.
Okay.
Also, if we get the training captain, that may be his car for a little while until we can get him a car. Keep in mind, me, Larry, and this training captain position are all 24-hour responders.
Do you know what sort of vehicle you have in mind for that?
Yes, we will, as long as I'm running this department, we are going to be buying essentially police vehicles, police SUVs. My philosophy on equipment, whether it be fire trucks or staff vehicles, is no frills, but high quality, and vehicles that are made to be flexible in use so that they can be assigned to other uses down the road.
Yeah.
And so special service vehicles, namely police vehicles, are set up for what we do.
Okay.
Plus, cops don't have enough people. We may have to help them out one of these days. Let me see. So that's the 2019 car. That is, we have money for that already in the ER&R, so that's not a budget problem. If we buy a car for the training captain, that will probably come out of mitigation funds next year. The next big one is SCBA's, self-contained breathing apparatus. Our breathing apparatus is elderly, and it no longer complies with the new standards on SCBA's anyway. So we already have the money that was saved up in the ER&R. and we'll be seeking to purchase those real soon. That's under Larry. Next item is a filling system for our SCBA apparatus. What we have right now is a sort of this trailer that has a compressor system on board. They bought that originally thinking that would serve our purposes for filling our air bottles. Well, it doesn't. It's woefully inadequate, extremely slow to fill. It's not what we need. I want to get rid of it. And we need to get a modern filling system with 1 or 2 fill stations. We will be speccing that out. We are speccing it out now. Plan to pay for it. Well, for one thing, we'll sell that trailer, and we'll use some of that money. Also, other money can come from one of 3 sources. Sale of the obsolete fire trucks that we're going to be getting rid of. Mitigation funds, but we're also going to try to get a grant. And if we're successful with that, that will pay for that system. Thermal imaging cameras and positive pressure ventilation fans, those will be coming up. They're also in the ER&R, so we have the money for them. And the last thing that we may purchase during the next year will maybe be a surplus medic unit from West Pierce Fire and Rescue. They've got one coming up for surplus if it suits our purposes. We may seek to pick that up because our backup aid car is adequate for BLS transports. It is inadequate for ALS transports, and it's elderly anyway. So what I would do is I would seek to pick up a real medic unit from West Pierce that's still serviceable and basically hold on to it until we figure out whether we're going to have an ALS program or not. And if we end up with an ALS program, we probably will refurbish it and re-chassis it for a fraction of what a new unit would cost us. And it'll be set up for paramedic purposes already. And if not, we will just make that our BLS reserve and sell the current BLS reserve.
What's the estimated cost on that?
The surplus medic unit?
Yeah.
No idea.
Okay.
It won't be much. New medic unit is, I believe, in the $100,000 to $150,000 range.
Yeah, I thought I'd heard that before.
Surplus, they would probably be asking something like $10,000.
Oh, really? Okay.
It'd probably be pretty cheap. Don't hold me to that.
All right.
But it would be pretty inexpensive.
Okay.
And I think that's it.
That's it? Okay. It's quite a list. Would you mind emailing that to me and Leo? I took notes, but I didn't want to miss anything just since he's not here.
Sure.
If you could. Nothing lengthy, just like a bullet point thing would be fine, I think.
Okay.
Next, we have police staffing.
Yes, we'll get to the graph here in a little bit, but in the last 10.5 months, we've lost, we're gonna lose a total of 4 officers. One of those being a sergeant, Wade Nelson, who left 2 months ago, and a dog, our canine holder. So with the possibility, by the end of this year, we'll have lost 6 officers. It's very tough for law enforcement around the state, not just DuPont, to hire good quality officers. But I think we got off to a good start. On September 15th, we interviewed 4 good candidates. We can't hire 3 out of that 4. We're starting the background on those folks right now. 2 out of the 3, we're starting the background. And the chart above shows a timeline that if everything works out the way we're hoping it to work out, is that we've completed the oral orders. The next step is to get it approved through civil service. We're meeting with civil service right now to go over some of our language in the civil service rules. Our civil service rules really hamper us in getting officers in here. We're kind of restricted compared to other agencies in the state. So the agencies in other agencies in the state have seen that we need to broaden our scope. Whether it's the amount of time they spent as full-time officers with another agency, or officers that we're seeing now throughout the state. They graduate through the academy, they're certified through the academy, they go through their field training process with another agency, and for some reason or another, they don't make that training program. We would have the ability to look at those folks, as long as it was nothing, they didn't do anything illegal, they didn't violate that agency's policy, we could ask them to apply as a lateral. That way, we don't have to pay for sending them to CJTC. Right now, the average time to get a new officer, if we were to bring a brand new officer in right now and say, okay, you're blessed by DuPont to go to the academy, we're looking at a 6-month time before they can even get into the academy. That's how backed up the academy is. And that's a whole different issue that all the police chiefs are working with the legislature to get more money so we can hold more classes, so there's just not that 6-month time. In DuPont, we cannot have an officer sit around for 6 months, pay them, and wait to go to the academy. There are things in the law that we can do. We can start them on their FTO training, in-house training. We can even commission them as conditional officers, but then we have to spend another 6 months. That time we're training them, then they're gone for 6 months in the academy. Then we have to bring them back and retrain them again. So we're just about done with the civil service. We're about 25% done. Next Thursday we'll be 100% done. The background investigations are going to take about 3 weeks. If everything goes according to plan. Then we have the polygraph, psychological and medical. I am hoping in the best case scenario, it'll be 2 weeks to get them scheduled, to get them going. We get the reports back. If everything goes all right, they move into the next phase where they start their FTO process. From start to finish, we're looking at about 15 weeks to bring in these 3 officers. All 3 of these officers have previous law enforcement experience. I believe Officer Morley sat on the board. I think he can attest that all 3 are people that the citizens of DuPont would be proud to have as officers. So I'm looking forward to bringing them on. Our staffing levels are at the point right now where we are running 1 car and juggling the sergeant schedules to try to cover shifts. We're really hurting bad for officers.
So when you say that we've lost, you said we've lost 4 plus Oliver?
Correct.
And the opportunity to get Oliver back, are you saying that's going to be gone?
No, it's not.
Okay,
It was the one officer that was going to take off Oliver was scheduled to go to training this next month. Now, he's one of the officers that's leaving us.
Okay.
I've talked it over with Barb Davenport, who has custody of Oliver right now, and is working Oliver constantly. So Oliver is getting all the training, and he's doing very well, and working with different agencies. I asked Barb to hold on and please give us a spot in January. My goal is that one of these officers, 3 officers, has expressed an interest in being a K-9 officer. I'm hoping that if everything runs correctly, we get this officer off FTO, and have to be agreement with the union, but we can send this officer to K-9 school.
So none of the 3 candidates have previous K-9 handling?
They do not have previous K-9 handling. They've been around dogs. They've all worked for agencies that had dogs, but they have not been the primary handler. The update I got about Oliver, that Oliver could be a very lazy dog and could turn into a house pet real quickly. So Oliver needs to be worked, and when he works, he's probably one of the best dogs in Western Washington. So we want Oliver back. The state wants Oliver to come back to DuPont, and hopefully Oliver will be at the trick or treat when we close down the streets. At Barb's going to bring Oliver up so the kids can see the dog.
That would be great.
But I think we are struggling.
So are all four gone?
One leaves, Officer Chung's last day is Friday. Officer Wyatt, or Officer Gustafson hasn't given me his 2 weeks notice yet, but it looks like he will be gone on this, basically his last day will be 7th of October. So, that gives us, we're juggling shifts, and
And the other two are already gone.
other two are already gone. So, that's only gonna give us 2 sergeants, to cover both day and night. Myself in the office during the day and the detective, and officers are just basically one deep.
Is there a commonality in why these people left?
Some I can talk about, some shouldn't be discussed in the open forum, but a lot of it has to do, some of it has to be money.
Yeah, I
When you have an officer tell you that when they first started the police agency they're going to, it's $10 more an hour, and that's a house payment for a young officer. Really, and we all know DuPont's a great place to work and live. As a police officer, especially a young police officer, you want excitement. And thank goodness we don't have as much excitement as some of the other agencies. That's a good thing. But for these young officers, they want to be out there racing up and down the road and talk about who they wrestled down to the ground. So, money's one thing.
kind of thought that's when they asked her.
And to be honest, you cannot, in my 30 years in law enforcement, you cannot ask officers to work alone at night or even during the day. It gets old. It gets to the point where you have to wait for backup. Hopefully Stillicum has somebody available. And it gets very tiresome to work at night.
So how many do we have right now that aren't leaving?
6, 7.
Does that include you?
7, not including.
7.
7 including you.
So trying to do a 24-hour coverage throughout the year is tough. If we get people with colds, you know, they can't make it to work, you're asking one person to extend their shift or switch shifts. So it's not a bad thing. We're going through these growing pains. It is bad for us right now, trying to juggle everything, but we also want quality people working with us. And I feel fairly confident, and Officer Morley, since he sat in that room, that we're getting 3. Now I'm hoping that in January, I have to work it out with the council, is that we can turn around and hire 2 more. And we do have people calling at least once a week asking to work here. And they're leaving some agencies that pay more money. They kind of like the direction that they think we're going, and they've expressed some interest. So I'm hoping we'll have another 6 or 7 people we can test through in January, get them through the process, and we get back up to staff, and hopefully start seeing some growth.
What about reserve officers? Do we have any reserve officers?
We have 2 reserve officers. Both of them have been outstanding when they're here. One's active military, and he's expecting his first child any week now. He lives here in DuPont. If he could ride every minute of every day, he'd be out there working. The other gentleman runs a construction company. He is very busy. Every time he's here, he gives it 100%, but there's been a couple times where he's worked and all of a sudden he's had to turn around and head to Seattle at 2 o'clock in the morning for his construction company. I would like to expand the reserve program. In my budget this year, I asked for some money for some uniforms for them, uniform components. We were lucky that we did have some old uniforms that they could just quickly tailor if it fits them, but there's some other things that we can provide for them. They're still in their training phase. I would like to expand the reserve program, but I want to take care of these 2 first. I want to make sure we get off on the right footing.
And how far are you into the 15-week process?
We're at week 3.5 right now. So along with Diana, everybody in the department, we're working very hard to push these gentlemen through so we don't have to hopefully not juggle our schedules like we're juggling for too much longer.
I'm thinking we should probably brief all of the council on the staffing issues and just kind of make sure everybody is educated about what's going on.
I agree, and I can have better numbers and updated numbers at the council meetings.
Okay. All right, very good. Anything else on staffing?
I think that's about it.
Okay. So we'll move to discussion items. Real quick, I could backtrack just a second. You were talking about the dangerous dog registration fines. So are you thinking that we should have a discussion as a council about increasing some of those fees, or whether they're effective or not?
I think what I should do is figure out what we do for those fees.
Mm-hmm.
So if we require either our animal control, person to check on those dogs and check the status periodically, I should have that information for the council, or we should look at increasing our fees. We have an administrative fee of $25, and I know that takes our city attorney a lot more time. So we may want to look at increasing our fees. And one thing is too, is a lot of these animals are in that situation because they are. They're dogs that are being walking on the trail and attacking another dog because the owners don't put them on a leash. So if we need to increase that penalty to get owners to start realizing that they need to take control of their animals, I think that's something we need to look at. But let me get the particulars on this, and if we need to, I could recommend that we increase the rates on some of these. But I'd like to know exactly what we do. If I have a dog that's potentially dangerous, I pay the $75 and $100, but what's the city's obligation, or what's our animal control officer's obligation to make sure that dog doesn't hurt anybody else?
Do you know if there were any citations since we last talked about this?
The last time, there was just the one that our animal control officer with Lakewood issued, and I brought that up at the last meeting. That was the one where the gentleman said he never leashed his dog, and so they issued him the citation. So we got it. We have a history with that gentleman.
All right, so moving on, the Community Connector Program.
I've asked our community resource officer, Officer Miller, to do a presentation. So
You can have the screen. Put that in. Sorry, Emma, that was getting their computer to.
Okay.
I might just be talking.
It's okay.
I would do this PowerPoint for police to change this plan.
We could talk about school zone emphasis if you guys
Let's
have
do
a couple
that.
minutes.
Yep.
Okay.
So at the beginning of the year, Officer Miller, along with the sergeants, conducted a school zone emphasis, focusing on Pioneer Middle School in the early morning, and then going over to Chloe Clark. And at the same time, our police volunteers acted as crossing guards for the children out there to make sure they got across the street safely. We issued 28 notices of infraction, and the interesting part on that is that it was basically on the one side of the Center Drive, closest to the school, that we issued those infractions. The other direction, our school zone sign, the flashing sign, is not operational. So basically, I got put over there along with the other officers, and we just gave verbal warnings.
Okay.
We could not enforce the speed zone there because there was not proper warning for the drivers.
Is it functioning now?
It is not functioning now. We just, and I just got the picture today and didn't have it up here. We're replacing that flashing light at Kincaid and Center Drive with a static sign that says school zone, speed limit 20 from these times. And it's a large sign. Gus Flynn and his crew is going to put it up here in the next week. So a lot of warnings were issued. It was over 16 warnings were issued, 32 warnings were issued in that same time frame. And the speeds range from 5 miles over, which is not, an officer will just write if they're 10 over, 5 over, up to 25 miles an hour, which is pretty fast going through that zone when kids are present. I think we did a good job with that. Got a lot of public input thanking us for being out there. We will do it again, and we want to announce today is we'll just go out there and force and have our volunteers out there doing crosswalk, and we'll be out there enforcing it again. En masse, and emphasis. Now the officers, our morning officers are out there enforcing it all the time, but we'll get hopefully extra bodies out there to enforce it also.
Is there any particular thing that would warrant a citation versus a warning?
Well, if we didn't have that
How
sign,
different from-
yeah. If we were stopping vehicles, the ones we did stop were going well over the 20 miles an hour. But with that sign inoperable, we could not write a ticket on that.
Yeah.
So we just gave warnings for people to slow down. But mostly, the folks that were getting those tickets were well over the speed limit. So some people, you could get all the excuses that you would hear. Didn't know it was a school zone, didn't know what time it was, in a hurry, wasn't paying attention. So, but it is, that section of Center Drive, when those children are walking across, is very dangerous for them, for the cars going too fast.
And I drive past that every morning, and I think it was last week or the week before, I saw someone pulled over every morning when I was leaving for work. So it was a good reminder for me also, because I just have that one little sign, but it's good to see that we're taking care of that and monitoring everything.
And at the same time, Officer Miller and the volunteers, the greeted kids coming into the school. And like I said, I think it was very popular to have us out there.
Good,
So,
good. And I did see them acting as the crossing guards too. I saw that as well. Okay,